Shabbat Shalom. So today we are going to be covering Tamar. We are going to be covering Tamar in Genesis chapter 38. She is Judah's daughter-in-law. But before we go into her, I also wanted to briefly discuss Tamar, which would be Absalom's daughter. As we remember from last study, and I'm going to try my best to, sorry, I have two computers and I hear my voice echoing. But in the last Shabbat, we had a beautiful study that was led by Amalinda. And during that study, we covered David's daughter, Tamar, and she was covered in 2 Samuel. Forgive me, I think it's chapter 13. And just really quickly, so this Tamar that we had discussed last Shabbat, she was a daughter of David. Her older brother Amon, had that desire. He lusted and he wanted her, and so he devised a plan, and ultimately he ended up forcing his sister to lay with him. Now his brother Absalom, when he heard of this, he was very much upset, and then he sent his I guess he sent people to kill him. And so I just wanted to give a little bit of a history of who, again, Absalom is, for those who were absent in last study. So now Absalom, after commanding his men to kill his brother Amon for what he had done to Tamar, he later on in the scriptures, he is mentioned that he has three sons, and this is found in 2 Samuel chapter 14, verse 27. There you go. And so, yeah, so here we hear about the Tamar, and this is going to be the third Tamar, but I just wanted to briefly discuss her, that she is Absalom's daughter, and in that verse, which I can go ahead and read, she's only mentioned in one verse, and that's why I wanted to briefly discuss her, but I still want to give her that time. If somebody else gets there before me, please feel free to just read. So it's 2 Samuel, and it's let's see here, chapter 14, verse 27. And I'm going to go ahead and read. And it says, "And unto Absalom there were born 3 sons and 1 daughter, whose name was Tamar. She was a woman of a fair countenance." So we see here that Tamar was a fair woman to look upon. Aside from that, she is Absalom's daughter. We don't know exactly why he decided to name her Tamar. It could be because of his sister. I do not know, but I did want to just cover her. And so we all know there are 3 Tamars in the scripture. Today we will mainly focus on Tamar, which is found in Genesis chapter 38. If there's any questions or hands or any extra comments that would like to be added, please feel free. Okay. Now we are going to move into the Tamar, which is Judah's daughter-in-law, and again, she is found in Genesis chapter 38. One thing that I wanted us to kind of keep in mind is, and I wrote these 2 questions down. Again, why is this woman Tamar mentioned in the Bible? As we're reading here, let's just have that question in mind, like, why is she mentioned? And also, why does Yahuah use this Tamar in particular in this story? Why is she used in the Bible? What's important of her in her story? We're all going to have different answers. We all might be inspired differently, but let's just keep that in mind as we read about this woman. Okay. we can start reading starting in verse 1 all the way to verse 5, if I can have a volunteer. I can go ahead. Okay, so it starts off in and it came to pass at the time that, oh, Linda, I see your hand.
Oh, okay.
Go ahead,
You want to read? If you want to read the first 5, go ahead. You want me to read it, or are you going to read it?
Go ahead, Linda.
Okay.
Yes,
okay. And
if you don't mind. Thank you.
Okay. And it came to pass at that time. You're welcome. And it came to pass at that time that Yahudah went down from his brethren and turned into a certain Adulamite whose name was Kira. And Yahudah saw there a daughter of a certain Canaanite whose name was Shua. And he took her and went in unto her, and she conceived and bare a son, and she called his name And she conceived again and bare a son, and called his name Onan. And she yet again conceived and bare a son, and called his name Shelah. And he was at Kazib when she bare him. I wanted to. I found in these scriptures here, well, it's just basically the foundation of what's going on here. But with Shua, I saw that here she had 3 sons. The first son she named which means watchful. The second son she named Onan, which means strong. And the third son she named Shelah, which means petition. And it kind of showed me that when she had her son, she saw a purpose in them. You know, she had a desire for them to, you know, obviously, I don't know whether they were named at birth or whether they were named later on, but watchful, strong, petition. All of these things had a potential. All of these sons had a potential to fulfill a specific purpose. So this is what I see as the story is starting off, that Yahudah had these 3 sons, and they were supposed to have been sons of purpose. But I'll just leave it at that because I don't want to get ahead of myself.
Thank you for sharing, Mama Linda. I wanted to see if anyone else had saw anything else, or anything that Linda just brought out. Did it inspire anything, any questions, any thoughts? So just really quickly too, I wanted to focus on verse 1, and I pray that it comes out and it makes sense when I say this. So, and it came to pass at that time that Judah went down from his brethren and turned into a certain Adulamite whose name was Hira, and that is a friend of Judah. I wanted to mainly right now focus just really quickly on Judah himself, just kind of have a little bit of a history. Why is it that Judah was not with his brethren? And why did he, what's it called? He went away from his family at that time. Why did he go and move away from his brethren, from under that protection of his father? So I guess what I'm trying to say here is, right before this, in chapter 37, I was able to read a little bit on it, and this is during the time that Joseph was sold, and he was, and the brothers had come together, and they were pretty much jealous because of his brother, and they were a little bit just angry towards him. And so they came together and they devised a plan to sell his brother. And initially it was, they wanted to kill Joseph. But if we remember, Judah was the one, and it says in verse 26, he is the one that said to his brothers, and I'm going to go ahead and just read it. It says, and Judah said unto his brethren, what profit is it if we slay our brother and conceal his blood? Come and let us sell him to the Ishmaelites. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a brief history with Judah, that he was already kind of struggling with something, you know, and so here it seems like it moves him towards leaving. I'm not quite sure what the reason is. It could be that he's just like not having issues with his family, obviously, but he's moving away, and now he's in a different territory. He's with Canaanites, you know, he's hanging out with these people. And so anyways, I just wanted to give a little bit of a history. If anyone else would like to just add anything to what I said, please feel free. But here we have Judah, who is coming to this Adullamite whose name is Hira, and Judah saw a daughter of a Canaanite whose name was Shua, and he went in unto her. So here we have this, again, Judah going into this woman who's a Canaanite. And of course, this is something that I'm sure he wasn't supposed to be doing to begin with. And like Amalinda mentioned, there are 3 sons that are conceived, and we can move forward after this, but I just wanted to give a brief history on Judah. And by the way, his name means praised. Remember this, ladies, with Judah, which is something really interesting. Is this is Judah? His name means praise because if I don't know if anyone remembers the story with, I believe it was with Leah and Rachel, and Leah wasn't able to conceive. Right, Amalinda, is it Leah's son?
Yeah, Judah was her 4th son.
Yes, and she said, "Praise Yahuah," because she blessed him with this boy, with Judah. So praise Abba. Okay, all right, sisters, we can move forward and continue on the next. I guess it's for verses. If someone can read verses 6 to 10. Sister Naisha,
Let me put my hand down.
did you have a question, or
okay.
do you want to read the next verses?
Shalom, ladies. I'm sorry I'm late. Can you tell me where we are?
Yes, Genesis chapter 38, and I'm just read the verses 1 through 5. If you can read the following verses 6 to 10.
Yes, chapter 38, verses 6 to 10.
Thank you.
And Yahudah took a wife for his firstborn, and her name was Tamar. But Yahudah's firstborn, was evil in the eyes of Yahuah, and Yahuah took his life. And Yahudah said to Onan, go in to your brother's wife and marry her, and raise up an heir to your brother. And Onan knew that the offspring would not be his. And it came to be, when he went in to his brother's wife, that he spilled on the ground, lest he should give an offspring to his brother. But what he did displeased Yahuah, so he took his life too. Excuse me. And so what do I think? Excuse me, ladies.
Bless you.
I think the the thing that stands out to me is that I believe, I guess, historically throughout scripture, that there is always a beautiful significance with the firstborn. And the fact that Yahudah's firstborn was evil in the sight of Yahuah, that's what's sticking out to me. Because, you know, in just reading other chapters, and if I think about what happened in Mitzrayim, when you know, Abba took the firstborn of all the livestock and all the people, and what happened like with King Herod's edict, and getting rid of all the firstborn. So I guess that's what sticks out to me as significant, that Yahuah would see that was evil in his eyes.
Praise Abba. Thank you for that. And thank you for reading as well. Any other hands?
Yeah, we need to go. Let's see.
I think what's interesting from what you read also, Sister Naisha, is verse 9, where it says, and Onah knew that the seed should not be his, and it came to pass when he went in unto his brother's wife that he spilled it on the ground. I think what's interesting is that it sounds to me like Onah knew that the seed, because he knew that the seed was not his, almost like he was being a little bit selfish, I guess, you know, a little bit selfish here, but he still went onto her knowing, you know, he knew that that seed was not his, but he still went in unto her regardless, even though he already knew that he was not going to do what his father commanded him to do.
And we have
and I believe this is, oh, okay, go ahead.
I'm sorry, just getting used to this. We have Sister Linda's hand up, and then also Sister Robbie.
Okay, thank you.
So it would be Sister
Yes,
Linda.
So, listen, just a little background right here. I just wanted to add Deuteronomy 25, the 25th chapter. I think we discussed this in one of the other classes before also, of what's going on here. Deuteronomy, start with verse 5. If brethren dwell together and one of them die and have no child, the wife of the dead shall not marry without unto a stranger. Her husband's brother shall go in unto her and take her to him to wife, and perform the duty of her husband's brother unto her. And it shall be that the firstborn which she beareth shall succeed in the name of his brother, which is dead, that his name be not put out of Yasharal. And if the brother like not to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate unto the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up unto his brother a name in Yasharal. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak unto him. And if he stand to it and say, I like not to take her, then shall his brother's wife come unto him in the presence of the elders, and loose his shoe from his foot and spit in his face, and shall answer and say, so shall it be done unto that man that will not build up his brother's house. And his name shall be called in Yasharal, the house of him that hath his shoe loosed. Mm-hmm. So he was transgressing against the law when he did this. I just wanted to make that point.
No, thank you for
bringing this. This is why
that.
The father was displeased.
Yes, praise Allah. And it's interesting, Linda, because this is before Deuteronomy, just that he knew the law. Like, it seems like the law was at that time spoken like by, you know, mouth to mouth or word, it wasn't written down yet. So, but he knew it and he was applying it. So praise Abba. Sister Robbie, Shalom, Sister Robbie.
I just wanted to go along with what Mama Linda and what you said, Sister Lady and Sister Diane, that this was the law, or part of their culture, whether it might have been actually written down or not, but I'm sure that he was aware of what the law was. Mm-hmm. This was a very important law because the Father made a way out for someone who didn't want to follow this procedure to redeem his brother's household by going and taking over the widow and then giving her a child, and the child bears her husband's name. If he didn't want to do it, he didn't have to do it. He could have went before the elders and they would have made it a public decree that he's not going to do this. Although he might have been disgraced for not building up his brother's house, at least he would not have been killed. But like in his case, like Sister Lady said, he knew that he didn't want to give the name of this child to his brother, but he went on into his brother's wife anyway, which was misleading and it was wrong. And then he deliberately wasted his semen, which was very disgraceful in the eyes of Yahuah. It was so terrible that Yahuah killed him instantly. So what I learned from this is that when Father tells me to do something, I need to do it. I better do it. I need to be obedient. I need to be respectful of Father's laws because they're there because he's an Elohim of order and he's a lawgiver, a statute giver, and his laws need to be obeyed and respected. And then it just also stresses that they knew back then, before we had all this scientific research, that a woman can't get pregnant without semen. They already knew that, just from, seeing what would happen. They were familiar with sexuality and anatomy and so forth. And it's just shows the importance that they were very intelligent people. They were aware of what they were doing. And our Yahusha, our Messiah, came from the Redeemer through our study about Ruth and Boaz. We would not have gotten our Redeemer if this law had not been respected and obeyed. And so it's beautiful because the Father knows what he's doing. It's always for his purpose, for his will to be done, that these laws are given to us as instructions. And then it benefits us as well. So that's what stood out from what everybody shared so far. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we have, let's see, Sister Nisha.
I was just thinking, I was reflecting on our women's Hebrew study from last week. Each week we look at a letter of the alphabet and we look at a word. And the letter that we looked at was the Nun. And some of the things in the Nun is, it basically represents the sprouting seed, and it looks like, what we would call today, the little guys, the little swimmers. And as I was reflecting on what was being discussed just a moment ago, when I first understood this passage, I understood things on a very carnal or fleshly level in terms of, Onan, like emptying his seed. But in studying the Hebrew, we began to understand on a spiritual level what that seed actually represents. Generational, heir. It represents in all effects, Yahusha and the Son. And so it gives greater, I think, reverence and understanding that we understand what that letter means and what the seed represents on a spiritual level, so that we understand, okay, why Abba would take the life of this man who spilled the seed on the ground, because there were spiritual implications that were attached to that I think we understood once we looked at that letter last week. So I just wanted to comment on that.
No, I completely agree, and I thank you for bringing that forth. I think it's something as we later on read into the story, just we know that is the Father is going to use Judah, his lineage, that Yahusha is going to come through his lineage. So knowing that, knowing that the Father had a purpose through, that he was going to use Judah's lineage to bring the Messiah. So of course it was something, like you said, Sister Naisha, something that the Father, when he spilled it on the ground, it was evil because he was being disobedient. So praise Abba, and thank you for making that connection as well. Okay. Is there anything else that we can pull out of these verses?
Sister Linda was going to be next, and I have something I wanted to say. Sister Linda?
Yeah, I just want to mention two things that I found to be very important. The first thing is Genesis 26:5, pertaining to the law not being codified at this particular time. We know Genesis 26:5 states, because that Abraham obeyed my voice, kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my Torah. So we know that they were still under the Father's, his laws. It's just because of transgressions, the penalties had to be added when they came back from Egypt. But for 400 years, they were over in Egypt, and a lot of them probably didn't even have the slightest clue as to what the laws of the governing factors and everything that the Father had given them. But this clearly shows us that even Abraham, this is one of the reasons why Abraham, Father was so pleased with Abraham, because Abraham kept his laws. The second thing I wanted to mention is that I was thinking about along the lines with Nisha about the seed, but I see that this word for seed is zera, it's the Zion, it's the resh, and the ayin. So I said I wanted to look more into that, particularly because of the emphasis and the significance of what the seed is here, because the seed really plays out a big part in this story here. That's all I wanted to mention. Praise Yah.
Praise Allah. Thank you.
Praise God. That's very true. All of all of this is playing out quite significantly, because Judah was upset. He was very upset, which shows all of us that the law really did exist back at this time. And as Sister Linda just showed us, all the way back to Genesis 26, and even before then, the law has always been there. We did look at verse 11 and 12, right? Okay. And I have to look this up, and maybe I can find this before we're done here. But the fact that there's two things here. In 11, Judah is telling Tamar to go back to her father's house. And if I remember correctly, Tamar really came from... I believe she came of Shem. She was like Shem's great granddaughter or something of this nature. I really have to go back, and prove that. But the fact that she had to go back to her father's house showed that she had a prestigious hold. She wasn't just anybody. Tamar was just not anybody. So in any other situation, if it was just some woman, then she just would have gone back home. She would have continued to wander around, whatever, But this is not what they did. He actually told her to go back to her father's home, and for the purpose of saving herself for his youngest son. See, rather than the father finding another woman for the son, he intentionally wants this woman to be Tamar. So he tells her to go back to her father's house and live as a widow, So why did he say to her, live as a widow? He didn't turn her loose, for her to do whatever she wanted to do. She was to live a particular lifestyle, and that was the lifestyle of a widow. So in a sense, she is mourning. She is mourning the wasted seed um, of his son. She doesn't remarry, and she stays under the head of her father. She has to have a covering. So he sends her back so that she can remain under a covering. And also, Judah has some serious concern for his youngest son, because he says, least peradventure, he died also as his brethren. So he didn't want his youngest son to spill his seed. This is my baby boy here. So, as if, well, let me get this one ready, and prepared to father a child with her. So she did.
Sure,
She
Diane. Thank you for sharing. I don't. We didn't read those verses yet.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I don't think. No. That's perfectly fine. I like the summary though. But do you mind? You don't mind reading them now?
Okay. All right. Jump to it. Okay.
It's okay, Sister Dan. Starting in verse 11 to 12.
Okay. Then said Judah to Tamar, his daughter-in-law, remain a widow at thy father's house till Shelah my son be grown. For he said, least peradventure he die also, as his brethren did. And Tamar went and dwelt in her father's house. And in process of time, the daughter of Shua, Judah's wife, died. And Judah was comforted and went up to his sheep herders to Timnath, he and his friend Hara and Adumalite. So I just kind of gave a point of view of what I saw this to be. So number one, Tamar had some recognition as a person. She wasn't just some person, that he got from the village. So all of these things work in Yahuwah's divine plan. And the fact that, he was afraid for his youngest son. Would he think that his youngest son was going to follow suit, as the other two did, and spill his seed as well, not following the law? We're not really given the reason. The only thing he says, peradventure he dies also. Or would this give him, Judah, chance to teach his son the way? Because as it stands, his son, just falling after his big brothers. So he may have an opportunity as he moves into manhood to teach him the way of Torah. So he would know his responsibility.
Yeah. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you. I did see in, I'm sorry, was there something else that I cut you off, Sister Diane?
No, I'm done. Thank you.
No, thank you. But thank you for sharing. And one thing that I guess what stands out, and I guess I could be wrong in this, but it just seems like for me, like Judah dealt with Tamar a little bit. He was a little bit like difficult. They're a little bit harsh. I don't know if, and this is just me perceiving it this way, but I'm not quite sure if Judah felt that she was a little bit to blame for her other two sons dying. Of course, the father knew that their heart was evil, but I don't know if Judah saw that. So I don't know if this is why also he sent her off, which is kind of, in a way, very a difficult thing for her to do. Is she's going back to her father's house. She's a widow of two, and she's childless, and now she's being sent back home to her father. It just seems a little bit harsh for me to see that Judah would not keep her at her house. But then at the same time, I don't know if maybe there's what's it called? Like it had to be that way until he was full grown, because I can see that too. So I can see it both ways. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, like, to me, that one verse.
You know, and what's interesting is that even though she had been married, I'm sorry, Sister Linda has her hand up. Sister Linda?
Oh, no, continue, Sis Diane. I'll go after you.
Okay.
I can go after you.
Okay. It just seems interesting that even though she was widowed, was she really? Well, yeah, she was widowed because they were killed. But you know, why didn't Yahuah destroy her? And why did Judah still prefer her to be the mother of his son's children? You know, there's and see, Judah himself may not have known, because I don't know if Yahuah told him what his plan was, but he felt compelled to do this thing, and I just call that the spirit of Yahuah, because he felt compelled to do this. I mean, after all, as women, if our sons did this thing, and we were living Torah, well, with the baby child, we wouldn't want the same woman involved. I mean, you know, even though it wasn't Tamar's fault, not what we're reading now. It wasn't her fault that the sons spilled their seed, but in the same token, would you still choose that same woman for the third time around? So, you know, I just found that very interesting. And rather than Judah looking for a different woman, he just tells her to go to her father's house. And yes, I believe Tamar was the great granddaughter of Jacob. I mean, you know, she was in the line. She lived in Canaan, but she was not a Canaanite. I believe someone can show me different here, but I believe she was Hebrew. You know, so that may have had something to do with it, even though Judah was hanging out with the Canaanites. You know, he was in their territory. That's where he was, but so was Tamar. So that's just something to be said about that. Amen. Thank you.
Amen. Thank you.
Chronicles.
Sister Linda?
Yeah. What I wanted to mention was with Tamar. First of all, here she is. Her husband has died. He was an evil man. So, you know, she's really going through a lot. You know, she's this is not like a happy life that she's been experiencing. And then by her being the oldest child, he had certain rights. He was supposed to receive the largest part of the inheritance. The brothers marrying the widow was to ensure that she would keep her rightful place in the family, and that she would be provided for. So we see all of these things not happening, and with Yehuda sending her back home to her father. And it states right there, he says, lest peradventure he die also, as his brethren did. Like, you taboo. I don't really want you nowhere around my sons. You understand what I'm saying and everything. And so he had no intentions on keeping his part of the bargain. But this is a very interesting story. But at the same time, we see Tamar is determined, as far as you're saying, Sis Diana, that you know, she wasn't a Canaanite. The only thing I do see here, because, you know, we do have a couple of Tamars, but this particular one, it says she's a daughter of a certain Canaanite in the second verse.
Yeah.
So maybe you're talking about on the other side or something, maybe, you know. But if you find that information, can you share with us? Because I'm not familiar with any of that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But in the second verse, it says, it does state that she's the daughter of a certain Canaanite.
Okay.
That's what I wanted to add. That's all I wanted to add at this particular time.
Praise Allah. Thank you. Thank you, Melinda. And thank you, Sister Diane. Okay, ladies, we can continue on with the next couple verses, 13 and 14. Can I get a volunteer? Sister Robbie. Are you there? I'll give her some time. You can read the next verses, Sister Robbie. I'm sorry?
I'm sorry, what Bible book are we in? I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to catch you off guard.
Oh, you know me, I'm just only cooking. That's what I'm always doing. Yeah, but I could still stop what I'm doing, stop chopping up vegetables for a minute. What chapter are we on?
It's chapter 38.
38, and what Bible book is that?
It's Genesis.
Okay,
chapter
Genesis,
38.
Okay, 38, okay. Genesis 38.
And since I had you, actually, since I had you stop chopping up vegetables, you don't mind reading verses? It was initially 13 and 14, but if you can read 13 all the way to 18.
Okay, sure. Okay, Genesis chapter 38, Bereshith, verses 13 through 18. And it was told Tamar, saying, Behold, your father-in-law goes up to Timnah to shear his sheep. And she put her widow's garments off from her, and covered her with a veil, and wrapped herself, and sat in an open place, which is by the way of Timnah. For she saw that Shelah was grown, and she was not given unto him to be his woman. When Yahudah saw her, he thought her to be a harlot, because she had covered her face. And he turned unto her by the way, and said, Go to, I pray you, let me come in unto you. For he knew not that she was his daughter-in-law. And she said, What will you give me, that you may come in unto me? And he said, I will send you a kid from the flock. And she said, Will you give me a pledge till you send it? And he said, What pledge shall I give you? And she said, Your signet, and your bracelets, and your staff that is in your hand. And he gave it her, and came in unto her, and she conceived by him.
Thank you, sister. Did you want to summarize what you read, or give a?
Well, it just seems like it was a deal. You know, a deal was made. You know, he said exactly what he wanted from her, and then she said exactly what she wanted from him. And you know, it's very interesting that harlots at that time, they would cover their faces up. That's how they would know if they were a harlot or not. And you know, what she did was out of desperation, because you know, she was thinking about her future, having offspring, about her place in the family, and about being provided for. So she didn't do this out of vindictiveness. She just, it seems like, did this out of desperation. And she was smart about it. You know, she got that pledge so that, you know, it would be a way that she can prove, you know, that she should not be put to death if she were to have conceived and then be brought before the assembly. She would be able to say who the child was so that the child and her would be spared, which is how we know it's what definitely happened. So she was a very intelligent woman. She had to project into the future what the outcome might be and be prepared for it. And that's what she did.
Praise Abba. Thank you, Sister Robbie, for sharing.
Oh, you're welcome.
Melinda, I see your hand raised.
Yes, I agree with Sis Robbie. She was protecting, she was looking for what belonged to her. And it's truly amazing how she goes about it. But before I just define a few of those things there, I like to say, it's interesting that Shelah, the third son, he named his first child, his first son, after his brother. Interesting, right? Because all of this was supposed to be going back to the legacy of anyway. You can find that in 1 Chronicles 4:21-23. And even though he didn't marry Tamar, he named his first son. The name went on, but there was more to it than just the name in this particular case. Now I want with what she just mentioned, I just want to mention a few things. First of all, she asked for a pledge. When she asked for a pledge, it reminded me of the security, the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit. That's a pledge for us. That's a guarantee that we are that we will enter into the KO. Now, look at the things that she received from Yahudah. He was given up because of his lust. He was given away to some woman that he thought he didn't know the most essential things that represented who he was. And at the same time, she was preserving it. She's being defined as a whore or harlot, but she was preserving the legacy of Yahudah, the genealogy of Yahudah, without knowing it on one side, and and Judah was giving away everything because the signet ring, it represented the power to make the laws, to set the seals. It was a symbol of the family heritage. It was a symbol of authority. The staff was the power, the consecration, it represents the dominion, the ministry, the direction, everything that pertains to kingdom living. And he was given away to somebody he didn't even know, his signet ring and his staff, because of his lust coming down on him. And these are the main things that he should have been protecting. Praise Yah. So he was giving away the legacy of Yahusha, and she was preserving it. Praise Yah.
Praise Abba. Thank you. Melinda, really quickly, what does a bracelet represent?
I looked at for the bracelet also. I didn't see anything specifically from the Hebraic culture other than just part of identity, as identity of who the family you belong to, and things of that nature. That's the only thing that I could add with the bracelet. Identity of family ties or whatever.
Oh, okay. Thank you. No, it's kind of, as you were talking, it reminded me of Esau and his brother, Jacob. It just reminded me when he was, and I was trying to look for the verse. If anybody knows it by memory, please let me know the verse. But it just reminded me when he gave up his mush, or his, where is it? Because he was so hungry. He had come from hunting, and so he told his brother, give me your inheritance. Jacob told Esau that, and Esau did it because of his hunger. He gave up his inheritance, his basically everything that's so vital and important. And here we have Judah doing the same thing. I had a question. I wonder why. It's kind of interesting that Judah did not recognize Tamar by voice. I know she was covered from the face, but it's interesting that he didn't recognize her voice. I would think he would, but awesome. Thank you, everyone, for sharing. Is there any other comments? Okay, we can move forward and let's see, how much time do we have? Would somebody like to read the next verses starting in 19 all the way to 26? 19 to 26.
Well, before we begin, that story of Esau selling his birthright is found in Genesis 25 and 29. It's about 4 or 5 verses long, but that's the story of it. You know, Esau was concerned with his flesh so much so that he was willing to give his birthright up for lentils.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you. Sister Dan, would you like to read the next verses?
Oh, which ones are they again, please?
19 to 26.
Okay. And she arose and went away and laid by her. Wait a minute. And she arose and went away and laid by her veil from her and put on the garments of her widowhood. And Judah sent the kid by the hand of his friend, the Adullamite, to receive his pledge from the woman's hand, but he found her not. Then he asked the men of that place, saying, Where is the harlot that was openly by the wayside? And they said, There was no harlot in this place. And he returned to Judah and said, I cannot find her. And also the men of the place said that there was no harlot in this place. And Judah said, Let her take it to her, lest we be shamed. Behold, I send this kid, and thou hast not found her. How far did you say go again, sister?
26.
Okay. And it came to pass about 3 months after that it was told Judah, saying, Tamar, thy daughter-in-law, hath played the harlot, and also, behold, she is with child by whoredom. And Judah said, Bring her forth, and let her be burnt. When she was brought forth, she sent to her father-in-law, saying, By the man whose these are, am I with child? And she said, Discern, I pray thee, whose are these, the signet and bracelet and staff? And Judah acknowledged them and said, She has been more righteous than I, because that I gave her not to Selah my son, and he knew her again no more. So there's so much to be said with all of this. I think it was Sister Linda that was saying, well, she looked after her own best, her own best. She was looking after herself to cause her to do what she did, by lying with Judah. And Sister Letty, at the very beginning, you said we were going to ask the question of why does Yahuah use Tamar, what is the purpose of using her? Well, then we know she becomes, the mother of Perez. But I'm just going to let this pass for now, because it's pretty much in the face that what happened, and that Judah changed his mind when he realized that he was the cause of it all. It kind of reminds me of the story of David, when David laid with Bathsheba, and then the prophet Nathan came to David and talked about the situation, and David felt like the man that did this thing should have been stoned or whatever, until Nathan told him, well, you're the one. And then when that happened, David had a different point of view about things. They both lamented. Judah acknowledged, that he acknowledged his weakness, by saying that she was more righteous than he was in what she did. But yeah, someone let someone else go on that one.
Praise Lava. Thank you. Thank you, Sister Diane. It's interesting though, because like you said in verse 23, when it says she is more righteous than I am, it almost seems like, and you probably touched on this too, but Judah almost recognizing like that he did something wrong. He recognized in this, in these verses, like 23 and 24, I believe, he's recognizing that responsibility. And it's just interesting because it says, lest we be shamed, in verse 23, when he's speaking to his friend, I forgot his name, but when he's speaking to his friend, the Dolomite. And anyways, but I just wanted to bring that up too, is him recognizing, taking that responsibility of saying, lest we be shamed, like, send this kid, and obviously she was not found, but it's almost like he's recognizing, like almost like David did as well. Okay, I see Sister Naisha's hand raised. Go ahead, Sister Naisha.
Yes, I was just reflecting. Just the other day, I was thinking about, what does it mean to walk in righteousness? And when I think about this story, and I feel like we've studied this story before, but when I think about this story on the surface, if we don't understand all the things that we've come to understand about the dynamic and the situation, it would seem as if Tamar's actions were unrighteous. But knowing the will of Yahuah, we see that the things that from a worldly perspective look unrighteous were actually, would likely be considered righteous. And so I was just, in my own personal time reflecting on, what does it mean for me personally to walk in righteousness? And what I'm seeing through this particular story is that that's really, walking in the will of Yahuah. And again, if we don't understand all of the underpinnings of this story, it would seem that Tamar's actions were, horrible. Oh my gosh, how could she, whore herself and do this to her father-in-law? But she was actually walking in the will of Yahuah. So that's just what I was thinking and wanted to share.
Thank you, Sister Naisha, for sharing. Melinda?
Yes, and we do have to see this from the culture at that particular time. Now, even though there was a law that would be codified later stating that a father-in-law cannot sleep with his daughter-in-law, if it was according to those Middle Assyrian laws that were in place at that time, if a man had no son over 10 years old, he could perform that particular obligation that we talked about in Deuteronomy 25:5 as a father-in-law. If none, he didn't have the sons that would step up and do, he could marry also. But in this particular case, he didn't want to really be a part of Tamar because he figured everything that touched Tamar was kind of like taboo, it appears. And also, we see also the law playing out here with Yahudah saying, let her be burned. Anyone that was caught in prostitution or harlotry or anything like that, they were to be burned. So we see the law playing out there also. I just wanted to point, and so now we get to him stating she has been more righteous than I. My definition of righteousness, and it took me a long time to come to it, because it was always right standing with the Father. That's what right standing, but I mean, that didn't get into the depth, the core of what it is. For me, living righteously is obeying the law. When it all comes down to it, obeying his commandments, having a moral conduct that is acceptable in his sight. Well, what's acceptable in his sight? He's already stipulated what's acceptable in his sight. So obeying that. And that's how I've come to the resolve that being righteous is obeying the Father's statutes, laws, and commandments. Praise Yah.
Praise Yah. And I have a question
Amen.
for everyone. Well, Sister Linda, did I hear you right when you say that for Tamar's culture, that if a man had a son that was under 10, then it was okay in their culture to go ahead and to father an heir? And I have a reason for asking that question.
Yes, according to the Syrian law that was in effect in the whole geographical area that they were following, that was it was yes. If he was 10 years old, if the son was over 10, he could perform the liberate obligation. But if he was not, the father could step in and do it to preserve the name of his son.
Well, you know,
the father-in-law, not
yeah.
the father, the
father-in-law. Yeah. Well, you know, maybe that's another
reason. Father-in-law.
Yes. Maybe that's another reason why Tamar did what she did. Maybe she did not feel as if she was doing anything wrong, because according to her culture, she was in the right to do what she did, which which also just makes you not look at her in such a negative sight. Well, she thought it was okay. You know, she thought she was being all right by doing that. And the next thing is, well, how did Judah not know that it was Tamar, even by the way she was dressed or whatever? But we know we have many stories of that, like Lot, for instance, he didn't know that he was going into his daughters or whatever. So we don't know how they could not know, but scripture tells us they didn't. I know my brother told me once, like in the Muslim community, the women just stay covered, all the time. And a lot of times they don't even see their faces or whatever. So if we looked at it from their culture, then perhaps we would understand why Judah did not know that was Tamar. But the other part of that, and thank you for sharing that, Sister Linda, in that as far as Tamar was concerned, she may not have thought that she was doing anything wrong. Mm-hmm. Amen. That's all.
Right.
What I wanted just to quickly mention, and thank you everyone, all you sisters, for sharing. No, definitely it's something that we have to take into consideration Tamar, her situation. But I guess something that I just wanted to mention is, although she may have done it unknowingly, maybe it wasn't her culture. I think I read somewhere that culture, they dress as a harlot almost for their gods. I could be completely wrong. And they do something like that when they're wanting to, for their crops, I think. They dress that way. They go into this, like they do like sexual things in order for their gods to get the crops moving and going. That's something that I was reading. I don't know very much about it. That's why I didn't want to mention it. But what I do want to say is, although she had reason in her mind to do this, she did still do this in a deceitful way. She still dressed and disguised herself as a harlot, and she still caused Judah to commit fornication. Although Judah also has that responsibility as well, because he was lusting over her. He did it, so I feel like they both were in the wrong. But yes, that was just that's from personally from where I see it. But of course, everything that was mentioned from everyone else, I also see that as well. And let's see, do we have time to just to finish up the last verses, which is 27 to 30? I can go ahead and read the last verses, 27 to 30. Let's see, and it says, and it came to pass in the time of her travail that, behold, twins were in her womb. And the midwife took and bound upon his hand a scarlet thread, saying, this came out first. And it came to pass, as she drew back his hand, that, behold, his brother came out. And she said, how hast thou broken forth? This breach be upon thee. Therefore his name was called Perez. And afterward came out his brother that had the scarlet thread upon his hand, and his name was called Sarah. It's just beautiful, because the father, I think one of the questions I had asked in the beginning, like, why is this woman being used, Tamar? What's so important of this woman in this story? Why is Yahuah using her? And one thing that I see, and please anyone else also share your thoughts, but what I see here is that the father had mercy upon this woman, and he used her to carry on the seed. This is a lineage through the lineage of Perez, Judah. It's through her womb that the Messiah comes through, and I think that's beautiful. The mercy that the father has upon this woman. Let's see, Amalinda, I see your hand raised.
Absolutely. And I think that the father had, I know the father had his hand in this all the time. And the scarlet thread that was on Zerah put his hand out first, his yod, his yod. The yod represents the power, the dominion, the authority, the work, the deeds, all of that from the Hebrew culture. And so the scarlet thread was tied around his hand, and the scarlet thread represents redemption, salvation. And his hand, immediately his brother broke through and came out first and became the one in line for the lineage of the genealogy of Yahusha. Isn't that something? If Zerah would have came out first, it would have been his lineage. It would not have been Yahusha. But the father switched that around, and Perez came out, and his name means a breaking forth. He came out first for to carry on the lineage for the redemption and the salvation of Yahshua, and for the world, for all the generations and all nations. Praise your precious name, Father. Amazing story, amazing. I saw some spiritual things in this story, like at the last minute that I never saw before. I said, whoa. I tell you, well, praise be to your name, Father.
Yes.
Shining your light on us.
If there's anything else, ladies, any comments, any revelation, please share. I just wanted to also just say that thank you, ladies, for coming today and being part of this study, and being able to come and just be able to be together, and we can edify one another like this. This is what I've been praying to the Father. Okay, so I just wanted to conclude this. Unless there's anything else that anyone else wants to share, I'm gonna go ahead and conclude. Tamar, chapter 38. And again, this Tamar is Judah's daughter-in-law. Thank you. Praise Abba.
Shalom, Akuti, and Brohim. Thank you so much for viewing this video. We hope it was helpful to your walk in the truth. Remember to always search the scriptures on your own, to study Abba's word and show yourself approved, according to 2 Timothy 2:15. We invite you to study with us. To join us in a live study, just go to our website at assemblyofyahuah.com and click the Join Us tab. We have something available Wednesday through Saturday of every week. If you've been Baruch or blessed by this video today or any other study, we encourage you to go to the Giving tab on our website. Our elders all have their own ways of income, so none of the giving or proceeds go to them. Instead, it goes to biblical assembly needs. We also encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you don't miss any new videos. We sincerely pray that Abba continues to direct your path as you acknowledge Him in all your ways. Much avaha, and again, shalom.